Welcome to Worksheet Events 101. Worksheet events occur whenever something happens on a worksheet. Now that sounds really boring and vague, but it's really cool. For example, an event of any kind is when you trigger a macro or a procedure by doing something other than, clicking on a nice little button. Those are called controls. But we're going to do an event. So like if you click somewhere on the worksheet, like a cell or a range of cells, then it would trigger an event. It would trigger your macro. So without further ado, let's hit Alt F11 and let's get into the Visual Basic Editor. Now, without having any modules or user forms or anything like that, I've just double-clicked on Sheet 1, or you can right-click View Code for Sheet 1, the only worksheet we have to work with. And what I'm going to do, instead of doing a sub-routine or sub-procedure under the General tab, I'm going to click and change it over to a worksheet event. And so the first one we're going to do is the worksheet selection change. Now, what do you think that means? Well, if you guessed that whenever a selection changes on the worksheet, it triggers a macro, you're absolutely right. I'm going to show you an example of that. So let's say wherever I am, regardless, every time I click away from that position, it's going to trigger this macro. So I'm going to type the word stop just to show you. Right now I'm clicking on A1, nothing happens. But if my selection changes, if I click on C2, then it triggers my selection change, and so it says stop. Okay, but it doesn't have to say stop. It could say some fun criteria. So I'm going to erase the word stop, and I'm going to say, if, and by the way, the word target right here, by val target as a range, that is very valuable to know that the word target means the cell that we have just clicked on. The cell that we are now on is your target. So we're going to say if target dot, and then you notice there's a lot of range properties here for the target. So we have target dot address, and we'll just say 0, 0. That means we don't have to have $signs in our analysis. If target dot address equals, let's say, C2, then message box. Oops. Message box, you've got cell C2. And we're going to say else, message box, not cell C2. Real simple thing like that. And yes, this would be annoying if you really had that else in there, but just to drive it home. So let's analyze this. The target.address is, in fact, capital C, letter 2. So it's going to say you've got cell C2, and hit OK. So now the kicker is if I click on C2, it's fine. Click on C2, it's fine. If I click on any other cell, it's going to say not cell C2. If I click here, it's going to say not cell C2. And if I click on C2, why, it says you've got cell C2. So now, let's just make that cell a little bit obvious here. Let's go back to our macro, and let's take out this else business here, and just only allow it to give a message if they've clicked on the green gaudy cell right there. So if I click here, it does nothing. If I click on cell C2, it says, hey, you've got cell C2. Or rather, it runs a macro. So that's how to use the selection change event to your advantage.